Good evening, students. This is PPS 777B, week 5. So I had the fortune of talking to about half of you already about your studies. This week we're working through IRB, the application, and hopefully you're finding as you have been writing the sections, including purpose, research design, population, sample, instrumentation. Really, those sections plug right into the IRB application. But I'm going through the specifics with most of you, and I think the ones that I've talked through by now feel really good about the application. I know a lot of you started it and felt very insecure, but again, as we go through it, makes more sense. And hopefully this is kind of clearing up for most of you at this point. My focus this week is, number one, getting through a real rough draft of the IRB with you. Number two, talking about informed consent and the process for getting permissions from your research participants. Remember, you can't do any of that officially until you have passed IRB. But then the third part is refining your tool, your instrumentation tool. So again, I've kind of been piece by piece giving you all feedback on your thesis, your chapter 3, your IRB, which is I'm just giving verbal feedback on IRB, and your questionnaires. Some of you have found a questionnaire that you've taken from another study or from some research that's been done before. Some of you are developing your own. The ones that are developing your own, a little bit more tricky, but we're getting through it. Remember, the key is to tie it to something that is already kind of existing, a program, something like that. If you can't do that, again, refer back to your research. So you know who you are in any of those contexts. Each of you has some slight differences, but those are my 3 focus areas. Our goal is to try to get our application in by October 9th. Some of you will be ready. Some of you might need a little bit more work. I do want to get it in as early as possible so you can start your actual study. However, I don't want you to submit earlier than before you're ready completely. So that's bad because that sets you back a couple weeks. Anyways, we will submit hopefully by October 9th in that area. And then following that, we'll be waiting on IRB and completing Chapter 3. So I feel really good about all that. Those that are on track, and when I say on track, those have kind of kept up with what I've been saying to write, have done the intro paragraph, they've done the purpose, they've done the research design, the research question, they've done the population, the sample, characteristics of the researcher, and did the rough draft of the instrumentation. If you've written those things, really you are on the home stretch of Chapter 3, if you can believe it or not. So I'll go through some of that today. This week is a little bit more light on the homework side because I want to make sure we're all at a good spot to continue with the application and the writing. So without further ado, I am going to go through a little bit of instrumentation, then talk about informed consent and researcher rights. So welcome and thanks for tuning in. So I know some of you have written your rough draft of your instrumentation, but as far as your instrument, your actual instrument that you're going to use, your questionnaire or survey, here are some rules of thumb. Number 1, your question should either be a tool that has been used already or should be based on a well-researched program or framework. If not, it should be derived from your research. Questions must provide enough depth to acquire meaningful data. Interviews should have 10 to 12 questions, and surveys can have between 15 and 20. If yours don't meet those numbers, talk to me and I'll let you know if you're okay. Surveys will begin with an informed consent question, which will say something along the lines of marking this box confirms that I understand the study and agree to participate. Interviewees will actually fill out the informed consent and you will keep that assigned. It's important for IRB that you can guarantee that all collected responses will be secured and only by the researcher, and the data analysis, once it's complete, all information will be discarded. Number 6, if you have not come up with a name for your tool, You can see in the application it asks for a name. We want you to identify the name. And we do this because, number one, it is specific and you can refer to it. Number two, for the field of research, someone else can use it under its name that you've created. So make sure you give a name to it. All of you will do a practice run. So this should be indicated in your IRB application. I forgot to mention this with some of you when I talked to you on the phone. But surveys, you'll use 2 volunteers, and you'll write that in your chapter 3 that you actually practice this. Interviewers, you will use 1 interviewee as a practice, and that'll just be to go through the process, go through the questions, and ask for their feedback. So in your IRB application, as well as in your chapter 3, you'll indicate that you have practiced this with a practice volunteer. So for the instrumentation section of the research, again, just to go over it a little bit, here are some of the things to remember. So the questions you're going to answer are, you're going to explain your tool and how you came up with it. What are the questions based off of? How will they offer insight on the research question? So you'll see similar questions in your IRB. Instrumentation section is just an expansion of that. Other questions that you'll see or answer will be, how will it be carried out and collected, and how will confidentiality be maintained? Again, you may be a little bit repetitive here, but explaining that research instrument using these questions is essential. So this is going to be 4 to 6 paragraphs total. This is a slide I used in the past for you, but basically you're going to follow those questions to write those. Most of you are already at least can articulate that. So all the sections and headers that you've done at this point, basically up to instrumentation, will enable you to complete the IRB application. And you will find that with the next sections, reliability and validity, you already kind of discussed that a little bit in your IRB application. So those should be no problem. So next week we're going to complete our informed consent. We will complete our final version of our instrument after my feedback. We will have our last conversation over the phone before we submit to IRB. That doesn't mean that I won't be giving you feedback before then, but last phone conversation, and our goal is October 9th. This week, make suggested changes on your thesis, IRB, and questionnaire and survey when I have edited those. Work on completing the questionnaire survey. Finalize the instrumentation section, and get some rest if possible. Here's a little glimpse at what I emailed to everybody. This is the informed consent form. This one is based off of one that I used for Brandman University for my doctorate, and I did do an interview. So this is a template. You can tweak it a little bit, not too much, but if you're doing a survey, if you're doing an interview, I want you to customize it to your study. And then in addition to that, something that I haven't really talked about is whether you're in doing a survey or you're doing interviews, you want to provide the researcher's rights to the participant. So you will need to either put this into the survey if you're doing a survey, or send this to your interviewee participant beforehand. So those are things that just guarantee that the researcher knows what they're getting into and that you've communicated effectively with the participant beforehand, and they have a full understanding of your research and their rights as a participant. Okay, thanks for your time. Be looking for that schedule for our phone conversations for next week, and please fill out your preferable time when you see that. Thank you, and have a great weekend.